I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. Today is another bonus episode where we are discussing Heidi II, a family tradition. Or technically it's called Courage Mountain, and it was released in 1990. And I'm discussing this film, which has technically nothing to do with time loops in itself, for two reasons. One is that in Groundhog Day, the movie that I just covered in season 1, the movie playing at the theater that Phil goes to is showing Heidi II. And two, that my guest today sent me a message several weeks ago asking if I was going to be covering Heidi II as a bonus episode. And so because of that, I was clearly said, well, I am now, and you're going to be my guest. And that guest is Paul Hawkins from the Blokebusters Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, yes. I am.
So are you regretting your suggestion now at this point?
Not necessarily regretting it, but cards on the table, I would not have minded never watching this film. However, I think it's going to lead to some interesting conversation, so I don't mind that.
So just a quick background of this film for people who have never heard of it, which is likely most of the people listening to this.
Yeah.
You know, it's a film that came out in 1990. I believe it was a theatrical release. It's called Courage Mountain, and it was actually based on the sequel novel to Heidi. And this movie takes place whenever Heidi is actually a teenager, and they fudged the timeline a bit.
Yes, they
and
did.
It actually it occurs about near the beginning of World War I, where Heidi is now an early teen, and she inherited some money, and she is going to a boarding school, and hijinks ensue. And this is probably best known for people who may have seen it or heard of it, this is one of the early film roles of Charlie Sheen, who plays a small role in this. He plays Peter, Heidi's, I guess you could call him her boyfriend, even though the actors are 10 years apart, which isn't entirely uncommon, but it was a little awkward, especially at the end, whenever you realize that, you know, the actress playing Heidi was about 14 or 15 years old, and Charlie Sheen was 24 or 25.
Yeah, that was a little odd. Although not as odd as if you actually look up the poster for this, he has a prominent, featuring role in the poster. And then you watch the film and he's in, 15% of it at most. So, yeah, it was very strange.
He's referred to a lot, although I thought it was funny that, you know, whenever she refers to him, the other girls at the boarding school make it sound like, oh yeah, I have a boyfriend. He's Canadian. You wouldn't know him.
Yeah, yes, that's the stereotypical. You guys wouldn't have met him. He's not from around here. It's right. But yeah, and also jumping back as well, you mentioned the fudging of the timeline. Yeah, this is set in somewhere around 1916, 1917, something in that era. It just after 1915. I know that because there is a line in the film that mentions it. The original Heidi novel is set in 1880 something. So yeah, there's just a little.
That's whenever the novel was written.
Yeah.
Too.
So it's it was set when it was written, which was in the 1880s, and then this is set Heidi's, I believe, 5 or 6 or something. She's fairly young in that.
She's 5, and the only reason that I know that is because it's mentioned in the Wikipedia article for Courage Mountain. Because since this is a bonus episode, I'm going a little bit more off the cuff. I didn't do a whole lot of research other than watching the film and just looking up the Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
But let me let me ask you, have you ever seen the original Heidi?
I have not. It is definitely a type of film that is not in my wheelhouse, so it is not something I have seen.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And one of the first things that I noticed whenever watching this film is this felt like one of those sequels where you're supposed to have seen the original movie first. Because it just like throws us into these characters and expects you to know exactly who they are and exactly what's going on. Did you get that impression as well?
A little bit, yeah. The weirdest thing for me was like watching it. The second it starts, you can tell it's a 90s era film. Obviously, as they're coming in, it's like, oh, Heidi and Grandpa. It's like, okay, clearly these are established characters, and I don't know them, but I will give the film a little bit of credit. It does spend enough time, probably for people that have already seen it, rehashing the actual relationship and everything. So you're not completely adrift, but yeah, no, it's quite clearly catching up from where you saw them last. But also because of the way it looks, because of the feel of it, I kind of felt like I was watching like a Wishbone episode or something like that. It just got that.
It did feel very low budget.
Yeah, it did. And I don't know if that was just because of the version we were watching. Obviously, it was not in HD because that wasn't a thing back then, and I don't think that Courage Mountain is one of the ones that paid the money to get the upgrade to HD when that started happening. So
Not like there's a lot of high action, other than my absolute favorite scene in this movie, and I'm curious if you know what I'm talking about.
now,
Just by what I'm saying, and this is jumping way ahead in the movie. But
can I hazard a guess that it involves a pair of skis?
yes. Oh my goodness, it's in the climax of the movie, which it's. I guess maybe we can say that just for a little bit and go into the actual plot.
Yeah, let's give it a minute.
I'm sure people I have never seen this and will never see this because it's not exactly very widely available.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a low quality copy on YouTube. This has most of the actors and actresses, which actually just now thinking about it, this is like a primarily female driven cast and young females too, which can be kind of a rarity, especially back then.
Yeah.
Where it's pretty much like kind of a coming of age film, and there's a lot of higher stakes than I was expecting to see, because Heidi goes into this boarding school, and immediate. First off, it's goes into the typical like boarding school issues. She's a country girl going into this city boarding school, and she gets immediately picked on, and then she gets like the one friend who sticks up for her. And you think that it's going to be that kind of movie, but like 5 minutes later, it just makes a hard left turn. And these Italian soldiers show up, and they take over this mansion that's being used as the boarding school, and they're like, everybody has to leave right now. We're taking over this to use as a military base because World War I is starting.
Yeah.
Did that throw you for a loop too?
Yeah, I mean, like it was something I purposely did not look up anything about this film. I was I'm just going to go into it completely blind and see what happens. And yeah, as we said, it starts off. I'll flat out say it starts out incredibly slowly. Like it's just so slow. It feels like we're just sitting with Heidi and her grandpa and Charlie Sheen for what felt like half an hour, I don't think it was half an hour, but it felt like it.
No, it's probably like 10 to 15 minutes, which is still a pretty long time
Yeah.
in an hour and a half movie.
And then she ends up going to the boarding school, not before meeting some of the happiest orphans you've ever seen in the world. But yeah, she ends up at this boarding school, and like they mention that there's tension and things going on. They also, in one scene, made it seem like they were quite literally at the border for Switzerland. Because when they ask Heidi to point out Switzerland, and she literally just points out the window. So it's like I felt like, were they in Switzerland? Like I didn't get a good idea of the geography there. And then they just have they have a couple of scenes, and it's like, okay, this is where it's going, and then it's like, war were declared, like, everyone out, the army turns up, they got to go, and then it's like, oh yeah, remember this creepy orphanage guy? Yeah, they're going there now. It's like, okay, okay.
Suddenly it turns into the bad parts of Annie.
Yeah,
or like the
Oliver.
first book of Lemony Snicket's.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, well,
where they're basically into this, this orphanage where the owner and his wife are the type of people who give all the orphans, a piece of bread and some slop, and they sit at a table in front of all the children eating like a 5-course candlelit dinner.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like, I mean, obviously it was trying to show, and I'm sure at the time, probably, like in that country, that is just kind of how it was. Like, there is a reason why you have the stereotype, like in things like Oliver Twist and all of that stuff, of the kids barely had anything and the people running it like were fed very well. But yeah, like this was over the top of just how stupid it was. What? One thing I did want to touch on, like jumping back to the beginning of the film. And I briefly sort of touched on this with you before we recorded. So, as we said, Charlie Sheen is in this. They made some very interesting choices with Charlie Sheen in this, and in part,
the majority of the actors and actresses have some type of European accent, and then Charlie Sheen's accent is exactly Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, he's just Charlie Sheen. And but on top of that, the way that his scenes were shot, so how it felt to me when I was watching it, because every time there was a camera on Charlie Sheen as he was doing his lines, or if he was at the beginning when he's watching Heidi run around the house for reasons I don't know, you never see him and his face and Heidi in the same shot. You see him standing there either giving his lines or looking at her, and then it cuts to the back of his head with Heidi giving her lines. So it looked like the reason that Charlie Sheen was in it was because it wasn't an English language film and someone else had been in it, and they'd cast Charlie Sheen to be the American version of that guy. So for about an hour, I was convinced that Charlie Sheen wasn't originally in it, and they'd reshot his scene because and it was even when he comes back in later, it's like, oh, they reshot the scenes with Charlie Sheen and the old guy. But then when it gets back to Heidi, it's shot the same way for the majority of the time that him and Heidi are there. Is that they're almost never in the same shot where you can see Charlie Sheen's face. It is so weird. I know that you're not going to go back and rewatch it, but if you ever do, check it out, because I could not notice it every single time. But
that wasn't something that I picked up on. I just
the thing as well, like the people in charge of the orphanarium, I didn't fully understand like the characters, because it was quite literally the guy that was running it, like even though clearly it was his wife who was like the brain behind it or whatever. The guy who was running it was effectively the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, like just without the extravagant outfit. Like he pretty much looked exactly the same. They
sleazy Italian guy.
Yeah, like made absolutely no attempt to to hide the fact that he's quite clearly the bad guy. And
the only reason that he's getting away with it is because he's friends with the governor.
Yes, he is best friend with the governor, of course. Now, one thing that, if he wasn't in charge of an orphanage, one thing he could do is he could definitely have been a tracker in the army, because twice in this film, he is able to track them down when there is no possible way he could have done that.
Well, I think the first one is a little bit more obvious.
I don't know, because
they, or at least they set it up within the movie to a certain extent, because they have the whole thing where, like, you know, 4 of the girls and 1 of the boys escape this orphanage by going through the sewer grate in the floor drain, and they hop in the back of the milk truck. And then you have the scene with the two heads, you know, Signor Brunel, I think, and Signore Brunel.
That sounds right, yeah.
They are basically interrogating all the rest of the orphans and the stolen children. And they're like, you know, tell us what you saw or else you're not going to have any breakfast. And then, like, the Signor, he's like, if you tell us something, you know, you'll get a nice breakfast. And then one of the kids is like, yeah, I saw them out the window. I saw them get in the milk truck. And so he, I guess, probably knows the milk truck's route. Or either that, or he knows that the milkman apparently has a thing for this this woman. Because they stop, and the milkman just starts immediately making out with a woman in a stereotypical, like, milkmaid outfit. As she, like, leans over and, like, you know, shows her cleavage off to the camera, and they start, like, heavily making out, and then the girls all jump out and they go into, like, the food storage area and just start pigging out.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, it's like, yeah, if you knew that the girls were trying to get away and you knew they got into the milk thing, you'd be like, okay, figure out, like, where did the milk cart go? Like, you could argue that he would be able to find that stuff out, but he was able to get to that farm within, like, on-screen time, like, within about 4 minutes of them arriving, which is insane. But then also, like, he knew that they must be hiding in the farm rather than having run away, which, to be fair, they should have just run away. But then the film wouldn't happen. But yeah, no, it was so weird. And then, yeah, as we're saying, the second
they immediately escape him.
Yeah.
Just by, you know, shoving a barrel at him and running away. And then they run off into the forest, and then immediately they're in a war zone with explosions literally going off all the way around them.
Yeah, that.
And then they start, you know, picking off supplies from dead soldiers.
Yeah, that war zone thing, like, that for me was the biggest what the hell moment in the entire film, because it's quite literally like they're just running into the forest And then, as you say, like, there's soldiers on either side of them. There's literal just explosions happening. Like, it's not even...
I had fireball explosions.
Yeah, like, what in 15, 16, whenever, like, what on the ground level would have made that? Like, it's not like they were cannons firing grenades, like, in that thing, but, like, all of this stuff is just happening, like, there wouldn't be mortar shells in a forest, you know? Like, and yeah, like, it just happens and then it's just gone. Like, and I honestly saw that and it was just like, okay, like, all right. And then all of a sudden, as you say, yeah, they're out the other side, and well, lucky these girls made it, but pretty much every other soldier you see is lying dead on the road. So...
And also, I didn't mention, you know, the whenever they escape from the orphanage, it's, you know, 4 girls and 1 boy, and then the Signor Brunel, he manages to get the boy and brings him back.
Yeah.
And the girls are just like, all right, bye, see ya. We're out of here. We're still alive.
Yeah.
And they just completely abandon him. And he is never seen again. He does not show up at all in the rest of the movie. He's dead, apparently.
Well, the thing is as well, and obviously kind of jumping around a little bit, like, so, you know, at the end of Heidi II, Courage Mountain, you know, it's good for the girls. Yay, everything's fine. But literally every other orphan, like, you have no idea what happened to them. Like, you may as well just forget about them the second that the girls are gone from the orphanage. They're just...
You do basically find out that, you know, of the 4 girls that are there, there's, you know, Heidi, who is technically an orphan because her parents are dead and she's been living with her grandfather.
Yeah.
And then there is the girl orphan that was at the train station that we met, that, you know, the happiest orphan on earth initially.
Yes, I mean, like, and seriously, like, that's...
And she's also the youngest. I would say she seems to be about maybe 7 years old.
Something like that, yeah. Like, Heidi sits next to her at the train station. She's just like, are you an orphan too? Yeah, we're orphans. We're just going to... It's like, what the hell? Like, how bad was your life before you were an orphan that you seem to be so happy about this?
And there's 2 other girls that are from the boarding school, and I think one of them was like one of them was the one that was friendly to Heidi, and then the other one was like basically the leader of the snobby girls that were bullying Heidi at the beginning.
Yeah, the one that yelled at her for actually taking her clothes off to get into a bath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I can't... That scene especially, it's like... Did she receive like no... like the headmaster of the school didn't just sit with her and like, this is how the day goes, and like explain to her. She just, you know, threw her in the middle and just expected her to pick things up as she went along.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like to me. Like, it, because, yeah, even the weirdest thing is that the headmistress even then sits down with Heidi and says, yeah, I'm like you. I was raised somewhere else and then I came here. So, you know, I had all this. And it's like, okay, so you knew that she wouldn't do things the way that everyone else does, and you didn't say a word to her.
Yeah, you didn't prepare her whatsoever, and yet, you know, after the girls get taken away and sent to the orphanage, then all of a sudden she cares immensely about all the girls, and, you know, that's kind of a through line where she keeps, you know, she does come to the orphanage to try and rescue them, but then she gets sent out by the muscle. And there's a few other instances, and then she eventually somehow makes her way to Heidi's grandfather's house.
Yeah, that was
because the 4 girls decide to cross the Alps to go to Switzerland, who is still neutral in this and go find Heidi's grandfather's home because they see some goats and they're like, well, if the and I didn't actually put this together until just now because it like the goat has a bell on it, but I just thought, well, that means that it's like a domesticated goat. But I'm curious if that was supposed to actually show that that was like one of the goats from Heidi's farm.
That,
And it's like if that goat could make it out here, then we can make our way back.
yeah, that could have been it, because that you don't see. Yeah, because it's not like there's any sweeping establishing shots or anything like that. Like, we don't see
And
any
it's not
other
the one
farms.
named goat because there is a named goat at the beginning. But it's not that named goat. At least I didn't think it was. I mean, she never calls the goat by its name. It just has a bell on it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That could have been probably a better way of emphasizing, like, this is the goat from my farm, so like we can follow the goat back, or we can take the path, and so on.
She basically does say that, just not in those words. She's like, if the goats can cross the mountain, like we can go anywhere a goat can go.
Yeah, which is technically wrong, because humans are definitely not kitted out the same way goats are, and I would wager there are many mountain goats that can climb places that humans, for the most part, especially teenage girls, probably could not do. Especially in those
and
shoes.
Somehow, and I think it's so bizarre too that we didn't mention, but Charlie Sheen's character at the beginning, he talks about he's joining the army.
Yeah.
And he's going to become a soldier, which he does.
In
but
Switzerland.
Then he's still able to just leave his post and go search for Heidi in the mountains and finds her.
Yep.
And then everything seems to be okay, and then he leaves. He's like, okay, bye, and doesn't even say bye to Heidi. He just says hi and says bye to the mean girl, and she uses that as yet another instance to like rub that in Heidi's face. It's like he left without even saying goodbye to you, and it did seem like he actually did leave. He just happened to see them because that's whenever master tracker number 2, because clearly Charlie Sheen is a master tracker because he's able to find them in the mountains.
Yeah, at night
in the
during a blizzard, apparently.
But also, Senor Brunel is able to find them and is able to overpower for preteen girls or young teen girls.
Yeah, shockingly, he was able
to tie them all together, and he has a plan. Yeah, and he has the plan to just throw them off the mountain because if they were able to tell about the living conditions and their secret factory where they're making the orphans make soap under slave labor conditions, then they would get in trouble. So he's just out there to kill the 4 girls and make it look like an accident.
Yeah.
But luckily Charlie Sheen sees him. Like, here's their little callback, their bird call that he shared with Heidi at the beginning of the film too.
Which I had completely forgotten. I'll be perfectly honest. By the time I saw that, I'd forgotten they'd done that.
And so he sees them and then comes to the rescue in the most amazing ski action shot ever. He becomes this like 90s extreme downhill skier, even though he seems to be skiing uphill somehow, because I believe that they're supposed to be higher in the mountain than he is. And yet he skis uphill magically and has all these shots of him like getting massive air.
Yeah, that's actually something that I will say. When he sees them and he looks through the binoculars that apparently do not amplify anything at all, he may as well have just put his hands around his eyes and he'd have achieved the same result based on the zoom those binoculars did not have. But like he was spying on them from above, like looking through the binoculars when we saw that. The issue is that from what we could tell, there were no jumps or crevices. Like there was nothing in between him and them. So it would have just been a straight shot downhill, but instead it's like, okay, I'm going to do my Tony Hawk 2 grind here to get some points so that I can be the stylist thing here. Like, yeah, it was as if they forgot they were making a film and they were like, we're just going to have fun with this. And then at the end of the day, they're like...
suddenly the X Games.
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the shoot day, like they're heading home and they're like, okay, so we got the shot of you just coming down the hill, right? It's like, damn it. I was like, oh, no one will know. We're fine. But, yeah. No.
And then it ends with him, running into Signor Brunel, and they go off the edge of the cliff in another just fantastic shot of
a rag doll.
Yes, of a rag doll falling down this massive cliff.
Yeah.
And Charlie Sheen manages to save himself by the tips of his fingers.
Oh yeah, he's full on Ethan Hunt / Nathan Draking it, just holding on for dear life. Yeah, I'll be honest. It kind of felt like Charlie Sheen was being his character from Hot Shots during most of this. That was the energy I got from him. It was so weird. But yeah, like the second that ragdoll went off, I just had images of Monty Python Flying Circus whenever a guy would be jumping off of a high building. And he just wee boom.
Well, I mean, as soon as it kicked into action ski mode, I just started laughing hysterically, and I didn't stop until after they pulled Charlie Sheen back up onto the cliff.
Oh yeah, I mean, in any other film, it would have been grab my hand, pull, everyone get pulled up. No, not in this one. Charlie Sheen is hanging on for dear life by something. I genuinely don't remember how he's doing it, but they dangle Heidi over to get to him on this slope that is quite clearly actually angled in a way that he could probably just lie on it, but they've turned the camera. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to tie this around you, and it's bunny ears through the loop, and it's like, what is going on? What's happening? Are we using this moment to try and teach people how to tie their shoes? What the hell?
This reminds me of the last bonus episode with Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where they have the action scene at the beginning where he's gearing up, and then they stop and have a 10-second real time of him tying his shoes.
Yeah,
it felt like that, only not played for comedy. This is supposed to be high stakes, climactic tension.
Yeah, and it is quite literally like she's saying, okay, so I'm gonna do this, and then she messed it up the first time, so they do it again, and then it's okay. But yeah, no, it's so weird. No.
And then after that, it's pretty much happily ever after. They get back to grandfather's house and everybody's there. Grandfather decides to adopt the 7-year-old actual orphan.
Yeah. And the interesting thing as well is that the mean girl who has been the one to say, oh, I've got all of these presents waiting for, going on and on about how wealthy her family is. And then, when they're really just stuck on that mountain and she says, okay, my parents are dead. I have no one. And that the teacher was her family at that point. And it's like, you don't see her getting adopted. You don't see any resolution to that. She's just back at school, I guess. I don't know, but she's not back at school because the war's still on.
I got the impression that that she did basically think of the teacher as her, her guardian.
Yeah, that
so
was...
she was reunited with her guardian, but she just didn't want to admit that because that would look bad.
Yeah,
and there is like a scattering of these like character moments, but they're like so few and far between, and they're just handled with such throwaway lines that it doesn't have that much of an impact on the viewer.
Yeah, and yeah, the interesting thing as well is like at the end, Charlie Sheen's character, like, he has to go be a soldier because they've set up that he's a soldier. Looks like a nutcracker.
Christmas Day, no less.
Yeah. Yeah, and he looks like he's a nutcracker, but he's apparently a soldier. And literally, if this was set anywhere else, that would be World War One is currently going, like, he's going off to war. They're in Switzerland. So, like, yeah, he's going
off to stand at his post and do nothing.
Yeah, he's basically
be neutral in a soldier's uniform.
Yeah, he's been called up for the mandatory civil service, which happened in Switzerland, and he'll be done in a few years, and then everything's fine. Like that's pretty much it. And apparently, it's the most lax service in the world because, as we mentioned earlier, he was able to just leave the base for a couple of days because his apparently girlfriend was missing, even though he had no proof of that at the time, if you actually think about it.
We've already managed to talk a lot more about this film than I expected to. There is one other scene that I have to call out that we skipped over earlier on, was whenever the soldiers take over the boarding house. There's just this random pillow fight that comes out of nowhere and just feathers everywhere, and it's just like the four women or the four girls. Well, it was the three girls because it didn't include the other orphan from the orphanage yet.
Yeah.
And the headmistress just having this pillow fight.
Yeah, and
just out of nowhere.
And the thing is, like, I didn't mind it because the way that the scene was set up, and that was the point of the headmistress finally admitting that she hated what was happening. Like, that was the point where she let her guard down. So I thought that was actually well done on her part. But
even though, like, the whole tone shifts at that point in the movie was just so...
Oh, yeah.
It's like...
Yeah, massive whiplash.
We go from... it's like you go from the boarding school nonsense to the military coming in to this light pillow fight, and then straight on to them getting sent to this orphanage with the orphanage guy who was set up as a villain from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it's all just so bizarre, but before we go on way too long just talking about this bizarre movie, I did want to tie it in a little bit to Groundhog Day because that was the inspiration for watching this film.
Yes.
So, what do you think Phil Connors would think about this movie if this was the movie that he was watching in the theater, according to him, over 100 times?
I was thinking about that today. I was trying to think, okay, how would that go? Because obviously, based on everything, it would seem that he probably went to see this for the first time after, I'd say somewhere between 10 to 20 repetitions of his day. Like, that was when he probably started to go, and when he started trying to take people to see it. And I feel like the first time he probably went by himself, and he was probably just sat completely silently, just like sort of slack-jawed, like, okay. Like, I feel like he probably hadn't seen Heidi. He was probably going just to do something different, to do that, and like he was probably watching everyone else watching the film, just being like, what's going on? But I genuinely think that as time went on and the more he saw it, like, and given that you do see him like slowly getting better as time goes on, like I genuinely think that by the end of him going to see the film, because I'm sure at some point he just stopped going to see the film, I feel like he probably came to appreciate some of the things that are in it. Like, as I say, the headmistress character, I thought she was probably the best thing in the film. Did her job very well, and some of the scenes were like just kind of just fun to watch. And he probably, like yourself, laughing his head off a couple of times during the X Games at the end. But I could see Phil coming to like it just from sheer repetition. But yeah, probably thinking it was one of the stupidest films he's ever seen. The first time we watched
it. Personally, I think that this is a perfect Phil Connors at the beginning of Groundhog Day date movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there is like practically nothing going on throughout the entire movie, which is perfect for an extended makeout session in the back row. There are like a few moments of like excitement, like whenever you get to the explosions. So if he does have like a woman that is like kind of trying to pay attention, that can be like a tense moment for the woman to like grab onto him. And then you've got some entertaining moments, like whenever it gets to the end where he's like, oh, hang on a second, you gotta see this part. You gotta let's take a moment. You gotta see this.
Oh yeah. Well, and when the when what's his name? Was it Benelli, Senior Benelli? I think like when he comes in to get the girls after the army, like that would be for Phil like the purpose of just like that scoundrel. Like that it's so well set up for if there were any any dates who were wrapped up in what's going to happen to the girls, like that is a perfect, like, I'm going to shake my fist at this guy, like, to earn some points.
Of course, it has a happy ending.
Yeah.
Except for the other orphans at the orphanage that are completely forgotten about.
Yeah, I believe it is. There's either like a headline or one character just offhand mentions that the orphanage is shut or something like that. Like, I'm fairly certain that it's closed, but yeah, there is literally nothing else, no other information. What happened to the orphans? Like, what's going on? There's nothing.
That could possibly be because by the end of the movie, I was so far like I was not paying attention to the film for the plot at that point. I was entertained by the X Games and a little creeped out by the kiss at the end.
Yeah, in the quite obviously like potato flakes that was supposed to be snow. That was in the era when they couldn't afford to actually bring in snow machines, so it was the TV budget thing of potato flakes look exactly like snow on TV, so let's just drown this thing. Like, they couldn't even have taken them to like funnily enough, if you'd have gone to like a ski resort or something for just that scene, because it's outside at night, they quite clearly could have done that at a place that was like putting snow onto, putting the fake snow onto the ramps and everything. But nope, they didn't bother doing that. Yeah,
that's all I have about it. I don't think we need to rate this movie or anything like
Oh,
that.
no.
Do you have any other final thoughts about Courage Mountain?
I mean, to be perfectly frank, I think this film shouldn't have been called Courage Mountain, because there isn't a mountain in it until the last third, and I could have just been called Heidi II Courage. Like, maybe Courage could work, I suppose, given what happened in it. But yeah, no, it shouldn't have been called Courage Mountain. And also, funnily enough, given everything that we've talked about and how weird it is, like, I would actually kind of recommend that people watch it, just because, like, the last act just descends into utter madness, which is always fun. And it's not terrible. People are actually doing some good acting in it. They're just stuck into stereotype roles. So it kind of feels like a little bit of a lampoon of some of those things. But yeah, I think I don't mind that I watched it, and I can definitely see there will be a lot of people that would actually seriously enjoy this, like completely unironically. I agree. It's not a terrible movie. It's not like one of those laughably bad movies. It has some decent parts in it. I wasn't expecting anything that great. I don't believe it's. I don't know. It might be. You might be able to pay to rent it on Amazon. Probably. I will just say, if you want to see a film that was like made about the same time, and not necessarily the same plot, but the same kind of feel and the same kind of thing. There is a film that I had completely forgotten about until I actually watched this, and some scene reminded me of it. It's called The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. It's a film set in sort of an alternate history England, where there are just roving packs of almost supernatural wolves around the country. So like, you never go out at night by yourself, otherwise these wolves will get you. And it's these two cousins that are trying to thwart the plans of their governess, because their parents go off on a trip or something, and seemingly something happened to them, so the governess takes over and basically turns it into kind of what we saw at the orphanage, like, makes them work in a sweatshop. She keeps all the money and food and barely feeds them, and they try and figure out a way of thwarting her and escaping. So like, it's while watching Courage Mountain, I was like, oh yeah, I saw this film ages ago and I actually quite liked it. So yeah, there you go. If you've heard us talking about Heidi II and you're like, well, that sounds awful, but like possibly a good premise, then I recommend The Wolves of Willoughby Chase instead.
Thanks for recommending this movie.
Oh, no problem.
It's not a great movie, but I can't believe that we've managed to talk for almost an hour about this movie. But
I know.
It's been a really fun conversation, and I am glad that you recommended it. And I had a lot of fun watching it and recording this. But thanks again for joining me, and why don't you go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you online?
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me back on. It's a pleasure as always. And you can find me primarily on Blokebusters, the Blokebusters Podcast. You can find Blokebusters on pretty much all podcasting platforms at this point. I don't believe there's too many that we're not on. And you can go to blokebusters.com, lovely little website there, or you can go to allportsopen.com Bubbawheat.com, and that's the network that we're on. Bunch of fine shows there. I'm also now a fairly regular fixture on the Soiled Retro Cinema podcast. He started churning those back out again recently. He took a bit of a break for various reasons, and now it's coming back, and I'm sort of one of the main hosts now. So that's fun. And that again, just Soiled Retro Cinema. Just go searching for that. You will find that in most places as well. But yeah, I see those are the main two things. And if you want to get a hold of me directly, if you send a message to Blokebusters on Twitter, or you can email theblokes@blokebusters.com, and I'll get that as well. I welcome any and all discourse about pretty much anything. I'm up for talking about whatever with anyone. So yes, do come say hi.
As always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstights@movienights.com. You can find me on Twitter @Bubbawheat, and you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. And I've got one more bonus episode coming out next week before I start the second season, Trapped in the Twilight Zone. So, until next time.
I'm a god. Well, what if there is no tomorrow? I'm a god. There wasn't one today.